Hot Water History, episode 172, Thursday night. Man, am I happy that we delayed recording an extra night because
Why?
Richard, we have a new pope.
What are we going to talk about tonight, Charlie?
I think that's a pretty easy topic. What a long day. It
Hmm.
feels like they elected him a couple days ago now.
Yes,
With how
well said.
quickly the news cycles are, we haven't even had a night where he's been the new pope elect.
Correct.
Um, I know we're gonna get to a lot of different
Can
talking
you
points here.
can you theorize or ascertain as to why it feels as though it's been a long day's journey into night?
A lot of it's how quick the media and social media cycles are. I
Hmm.
wasn't really on Twitter in, was it 2013, I believe, Francis was elected. And this stuff just happens really quickly. You have all of your arguments right away
Sure.
after
Could I offer another?
everyone's got their podcast, everyone's got their tweets that they're
True.
sending out, everyone's
There's a
got
lot
their
to consume.
reactions. I'm sure people have their text messages and group chats that they're ironing out and baking ideas in. It all happens really fast.
Yes. Might I also suggest another possibility, and that is if you didn't have a continuation of the previous what we might ascertain as a most likely continuation of the previous pontificate, which was exhausting to the Orthodox, then if there was a break, wouldn't it seem very fresh and new? But this isn't a break, so it seems old. I don't want to say old, but played out a bit.
Oh, I get what you're saying. When Francis dies, there's
There's relief
there's a sense of relief,
and
and then right,
possibility for some new direction, which is hopefully a U-turn back to orthodoxy, tradition, solid for dependence upon and preaching of Sacra Doctrina, the core substantive elements of the faith. But that's not what we're getting. And so I was asked by a multitude of people today in a variety of different modes of correspondence what my reaction is.
right.
And I had two upon seeing Cardinal Prevost go out onto the loggia and choose the pontifical name Leo XIV. Remember that just last week, my reaction to the death of Pope Francis was relief. Now the anxiety's back. The anxiety that is even more intensified because of the lack of where this is going within the context of knowing in general where this is going and because of his age for a probably long and extended pontificate. So the Sturm und Drang, which was very much, I don't know if I shared with you or the audience when Francis was elected initially in 2013.
Hmm.
I felt as though there was an emptiness immediately within my consciousness, or my instinctual reaction was almost lament and concern without having a great deal of background as to who Jorge Maria Bergoglio was. Now, that being said, it could have been my rather visceral and instinctive reaction as a former Dominican to a Jesuit, a modern Jesuit being elevated to the See of Peter at that time. I'll admit that that played into the thing, and it proved to be quite accurate, an accurate gut feeling. It's very similar now, if not intensified, because the way I described it, it's as though we worked out for the past, let's say, 12 years, and let's say years correspond to 10-minute segments. So we worked out for 120 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we exhausted ourselves as, let's say, this almost antagonistic trainer really put us through the ringer in terms of our workout, degrading us, but we always stayed fast to attaining the telos or the goal doing the sets completely and making sure that we were doing them in the proper way, even as we might have been degraded or insulted by the trainer. And then you finally catch your wind and you catch a break. That's what I relate the break is, and catching our wind, maybe grabbing a drink of water, the interregnum period. And now it feels like someone just came up and punched me in the gut.
Okay.
After I was
I'm a
hoping,
little more, just to spoil my take a little bit, I'm a little
uh,
more white-pilled than you are on this. And I'll explain
yes,
later. But tell us, what are we say that's not what we're getting in reference to a change and, reversion back to a more Orthodox Catholic Church. What are we getting? What should we expect?
well, whenever you're talking about someone who's entering into a new position, let's just use uh, an extended secular metaphor. You would look at an applicant's past experience and what he's articulated in terms of his vision for where said institution ought to be and go, and how he operated in that realm or profession in prior circumstances, in prior employment. So let's just examine what Robert Prevost, as an Augustinian friar, what his CV is in a sense. Yes. So we know these facts about him, and these facts are as follows. He attended Villanova University. He majored in mathematics. He discerned into the priesthood and became an Augustinian friar. He went on to attend for his theological studies the Catholic Theological Union in Hyde Park, Southside Chicago.
Can we talk about this? Sorry, I have to cut you off because it took us 15 minutes to talk about this.
Hmm.
This guy was born 10 minutes from where I'm speaking right now.
Yes, he was. Well, was he born?
He was
Where was he
born on
exactly born?
he was born on I think it was called the Old Mercy Hospital on
Oh,
25th and Prairie.
okay, yes,
It's
that's right.
10 minutes away.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And grew up in Dalton, Illinois, which
Correct.
is south suburb,
Wild to
25
think
minutes.
that the Pope of the Catholic Church is calls Dalton home along with Tiffany Henyard, America's mayor, who squandered all that money from this terrible
Yeah.
and dilapidated suburb now. So it's just interesting to note that. But so this is his cricket vitae. The Catholic Theological Union, and this goes back to my days in formation, but even before that, when I was a University of Chicago student and even a student at Loyola, the CTU is home of the most wacko progressive, anti-orthodox enemies of the church embedded into one theological seminary slash institution slash theologate. It welcomes all dissenters, and it is a home. And I don't mean dissenters in the good sense. I mean dissenters in the rebels to the faith. They are the first. It welcomes all those who would and found comfort in still being called nominally Catholic, but get their thrills from deriding the ancient traditions, teachings, liturgy, the core sacra doctrina of the church, especially on social issues, but not just on moral and social issues. But we're talking down to Trinitarian theology and systematic theology. You see,
Yeah.
what most concerns me about that is that not only did he matriculate through the CTU, but whatever his disposition was and his modus operandi toward being formed as a priest and then eventually being elevated to the episcopacy, what any seminarian or anyone who's gone through even a modicum of formation in the post conciliar world will tell you is that oftentimes formation, because the church is so divided and elements and powers that be are so at odds with one another, traditionalists versus modernists, just let's draw those two very. I understand that there are multiple levels and different nuances within those groups, but just allow that to be the case. it is a real challenge to one's authenticity to make your way through. It's as though you're on a maze and you're constantly presented with forks in the road, and oftentimes the temptation is to take one fork that you think is most, well, my temptation, and this is probably why I didn't last in formation and wanted to eventually leave to the extent that I did, and why so many, we're talking about tens of thousands of those who were priests and religious prior to the council, and then certainly post council, whether they be in formation or they had been ordained or solemnly professed, what have you. That's why they have left, is because if you're going to track the authentic to yourself and faithful to your church path in the post conciliar clerical formation world, and I would also include within that the clerical career world in the church, you have to put on a lot of airs, and you almost, it's required of you. It's not just something that's accidental, but it's absolutely required of you to know who the players are, what their dispositions are, be a political animal rather than to allow individuals without pride or pretension to see your holiness and the good that you do and give glory to God. So, with that being said, the fact that he was able to negotiate his way through the CTU and then emerge from it unscathed, it seems, to the point where he's elevated to higher positions within the Augustine order. We'll get to problems where he's embroiled in sexual abuse scandals. Not that he is the offender, but that he was awfully, well, his lack of consideration, his lack of protection of minors when it regarded the priest principal at Providence High School over whom he had jurisdiction, and then talk about proximity to our own place, just blocks away from where I lived when I was at University of Chicago at St. Thomas the Apostle. He allowed two sexual predators to live within a block of a Catholic elementary school and alerted none of the authorities, nor the parents, nor the administration of the school. That is a negligence in this era that I would argue immediately disqualifies you from elevation to anywhere near a place of a place within the hierarchy of the church, much less the chair of Peter. I mean, imagine again, we have to, you were born when the clerical abuse scandal really broke. We're talking about 2001, 2002, 2023.
Right.
And we had the Dallas Accords and all of this. We have to stamp this out because this is not only insidious, but it has to be rooted out because think about the horrific millstone punishment of a trusted cleric or religious abusing an innocent child in the most disgusting, sexually depraved ways.
Yeah.
The
Millstones.
pedophilia, the ruination that that causes, the cancerous malignancy that that implants within the church and festers within the church, and then leads people astray, leads souls into perdition because of the abuse and the lack of protection that the church ought to have afforded it. Instead, the church becomes the conduit or the avenue of that crime. And 24 years later, 23 years later, we keep elevating men like Jorge Bergoglio and Robert Prevost, who are doing little to nothing to do that, to stop this. This isn't just an oversight. It festers on. It's almost as if this is like a honeypotting thing, where they're all moving each other around, just like they move the predator priests around. And well, we can elevate him because after all, if we elevate him to pope, well, he can't come down on me when I have this checkered past, whether I'm the actual abuser myself or have been engaged or adjacent to the. I mean, I I got a sick pit in my stomach when, as I was watching the television coverage after the white smoke plumed from the chimney in the Vatican, who's one of the first cardinals I see? Cardinal Donald Wuerl, who covered up for Theodore McCarrick. It was right there in Rome. That's the first American cardinal that they showed. And he's there. There's no this guy should be in jail, if not already sent to the gallows for what he covered up. The abuse of seminarians, abuse of young boys and girls. I mean, these are the men that oversaw. Cardinal Wuerl was Bishop of Pittsburgh in the years in which the sexual abuse festered in Pennsylvania to the extent that the Pennsylvania Report came out. He's a disgusting human being. Cardinal of the Catholic Church. Smile ear to ear today in the Vatican. This cancer has to be nuked. It has to be eradicated, pulled up from the roots. And I just don't see Leo XIV doing any of that, especially to the men who are both implicated, but also the men who are his references on his curriculum vitae. Let's go back to the curriculum vitae. We talked about his background. He goes and is educated by the most liberal, progressive, anti-church, anti-tradition radicals, probably more Freemasons than actual Catholics at CTU. Radical feminists, radical progressives, radical modernists, who, of course, looked at, of all people, John Paul II as an arch conservative. The guy who went to Assisi and prayed and essentially admitted or held up that all of these different faiths are praying to God and they're of generally equal value. I mean, this is ridiculous, this notion. But they were able to move that Overton window of what constituted orthodoxy to such a degree that now the bar is so low. As I was talking to a very Orthodox, fervent, passionate, great holy priest tonight, just prior to our podcast, the bar is so low.
Right.
Now, think about the first things that came out about Leo XIV. Well, he's strongly pro-life and he's really against gender ideology. That is the fucking bar now for the
Yeah.
Pope.
Yeah. I got that set a couple times.
I mean, think about, and we hear all this stuff about, well, we've had terrible popes in the past. But they were even when we're talking about the Borgia popes and a lot of the anti-Borgia popes about yes, they were immoral and yes, they had concubines. They had a tunnel to their
Degenerates. Yeah.
degenerates and all the like. But you know what? Alexander VI, when it came down to questions of clerical celibacy, when it came down to challenges to the core of the faith, he was rock solid. And a lot of the anti-Borgia sentiment is born out of an anti-Spanish sentiment because the Borgias were Spanish and they're ruling over the Roman See and they were so influential within Italy for so long that they bore the brunt of that. You see, it's not a lot unlike the Black Legend or Leyenda Negra when the British are hyperbolizing to the point of just calumny what the Spanish were doing in the colonies, for example. So that we have to keep that in consideration. What a far cry when we say, oh, this is the litmus test that, well, he believes there are two genders. Well, whoop-de fucking do. I mean, think about it for a second too, Charlie. I mean, we have popes in the past. Pope St. Gregory the Great, a monk of such piety and such holiness that they had to pull him into the papacy.
Right.
Right? And then really all he didn't want, all he wanted to do is be a fervent contemplative. And then what comes about of he's the great, he's Magnus because of what transpired in his papacy. From the great story of when Augustine of Canterbury is walking with him and they say, when the Angles are coming aboard as slaves off the Tiber River, and he says to Augustine, I want you to go convert the Angles here. Or he asks Augustine, he says, who are these people? And Augustine says, well, those are the Angles. He goes, no, they're angels. Go convert them. And he sends Augustine of Canterbury to England to convert the Angles. Or the story of Pope Fabian. Pope Fabian wasn't even a priest. Fabian, when there was a papal conclave going on, he took his manure. He was a farmer. He took his manure into Rome to sell, his fertilizer. And a dove representing the Holy Spirit came upon his shoulder and hovered over his head the whole time. And the people said, he's the Pope. That's the Holy Spirit. And then he led a fantastically holy pontificate. We're talking about great men. Pius the Ninth, Leo the First, telling Attila in a way that, in a fashion that none of our leaders would dare to say to a state leader today, none of our church leaders would dare to say to a state leader or a general today, you are not coming into Rome. Do not desecrate, do not tarnish or raise this city. And Attila understood his both moral and, I suppose you might say, just evident fortitude, and relented and did not invade the city. So those are the, and then of course you have Peter himself. And what did Peter do when the question came, to whom do you serve? Who do you serve? He said, I serve the Lord, the God of life, who hung upon a tree for my salvation, whose miracles I witnessed, whose death I fled from, his passion I fled from, but in whose resurrection I live. Hang me upon the tree, but do not give me the honor to die like my Lord. Hang me upside down. Right? And
Sure.
in the meantime, we have Robert Prevost and Mario Bergoglio, because they're not preaching the authentic Orthodox life-giving faith that is salvific, that brings about true conversion and metanoia that Paul talked about. They depend upon the state. It's not that they simply acquiesce to it. They depend upon it because the faithful, as much as there are fervent Catholics, the faithful are not enlivened by this pseudo replica, this phony replica of the church. And forgive me, that was a tangent because I want to go back to this extended metaphor of the curriculum vitae. So we have the CTU. He then goes to the, after becoming a fully professed Augustinian friar, he goes to the uh, Angelicum in Rome, run by Dominicans, by the way. Okay, the Angelicum's run by Dominicans. But of course, being a Dominican myself, in the decade or two after Robert Prevost was there, everybody knew that the Angelicum fell and became just a shithouse of radical theology. And that it was John, through the efforts of John Paul II in part, and then even Cardinal Ratzinger with some solid Dominicans, that the place regained its reputation. It was on the brink of closing. So, in a way, the level of lack of serious theology and formation that was going on there. Not to mention that it was the same Dominican order that produced radical homosexualist cardinals like Timothy Radcliffe, who was the Master General of the order during the time that I think they matched up where Prevost was going to the Angelicum. Now, was he exposed to the Summa? I don't know his intellectual prowess or lack thereof, but I can tell you this: no one was elevated during Francis' pontificate to the rank of cardinal as Bishop Robert Prevost was, because he was some great Thomist scholar. You see,
Yeah.
so he goes down and he serves as a missionary in places like Peru, and it was as late as the COVID crisis in 2020 where he was serving as the bishop of, and I always have a hard time pronouncing the name of it. It's Chichicua in Peru. And the videos have surfaced today that during COVID, Bishop Prevost was out in a mask with the Blessed Sacrament, of course, going through the city. Those priests in attendance and a layman, it seems, around him are, of course, 6 feet apart. And why was this seen as necessary to show? Well, to modernist, very, I suppose, satisfied, or those who are ready to crown him as a great pope already within a period of hours, look at how he's showing his devotion to the Blessed Sacrament and boldly proclaiming it in a mask. And that's why I tweeted in response to someone who posted that video saying, "Oh, look at how wonderful this is. Our current Pope Leo XIV as bishop is going through this Chicua town of Peru with the Blessed Sacrament." Why does he have to do that? Because he allowed the churches to close. We had it, Charlie, we had a Lent and an Easter Triduum where no masses were said in the churches throughout the world. Is that not the height? Is that not the triumph of Freemasonic modernist scientism of what you would want to have happen
Yeah, that's the peak.
to the church?
That's the peak.
The source and summit of our faith, the very life of the church, is the presence of the Holy Spirit as its soul, and the Lord upon which we feed as sheep, offered in the paschal sacrifice on Calvary, one time for all. And they shut it off. They choked the essence of the church, and our bishops went along with it. So when someone replied to my tweet,
Let me pull this up.
go ahead. So when someone replied to my response that when the state or any authority declares to you, well, first of all, as I stated
Here's the
here at the
video.
bottom, yeah, here's the video. You could see this. There's our bishop, then Bishop Robert Prevost, going through the Peruvian town where he served as bishop. Of course, they're all wearing masks. The town is deserted. You know, even if you look at it through a materialistic, a dialectical material concern, just how are these poor people even affording this? There's no one out in the street where they can't labor, they can't go anywhere. Where was the bishop saying anything about that? Anyway, my response to this is he should have called out the hoax for what it was and opened churches. To which this Vincent character responded, I'm trying to do the best with his poor grammar. He can't, the then president of Peru is insane or was insane and had insane masking laws. He even mandated double masking at one point. To which I respond logically as an actual Catholic, if one is a bishop and the state mandates that you close churches, you open them and then you go to jail or the gallows. You don't obey. So, in my discussions during the interregnum, which was filled with kind of a glee and excitement and anticipation, people were asked, and I kind of tracked with all the people ranging from Catholic influencers, traditional media personnel, alternative media personnel, strong Catholic commentators, whatever they were. Okay, those within my sphere, and they were all asked, "What do you want from the next pope?" Just something fundamental, basic. And they answers ranged on the part of others from I want an actual Catholic, I want someone who will bring back the Latin Mass, someone who will use. I like this comment. A lot of them said I think there was Patrick Coffin. In fact, Patrick Coffin said, "I want the current cardinals and eventual pope to feel free to use fiducia supplicans and traditionis custodes as the paper for the black smoke for conclaves from now on to eternity." That would be wonderful. Just abrogate those horrific motu proprio or instructions. My response was, I want the next pope when he puts on red vestments and puts on red shoes, not to pause to understand that when he puts those on, there's not a hint of inauthenticity or reluctance, to understand that as he accepts the See of Peter, those red shoes might be more than just symbols. He's willing to die for the faith. That's why they wear them. In other words, gone ought to be the simple symbolism within them. There has to be something meaty behind it, something incarnate in your willingness to take on this role, incarnate in the sense that you're willing to be a martyr and witness to the faith. And someone who has on his curriculum vitae when the church or when the state demanded that he close the portal to salvation, when it demanded that non-reception of the sacraments was to be de rigueur in order to save lives, he acquiesced. I don't know. Finally, my final point with the whole extended resume slash curriculum vitae thing, just when you look at an applicant's CV or resume and you scroll down to resources and references,
Yeah.
and on that CV, men like Blaze Cupich and Pietro Parolin and Cardinal Hollerich and Cardinal Grech and Cardinal Marx and Donald Wuerl are your references. They're the ones who you want the employers, that is, say, the rest of the Catholic world, the sheep within the fold, to call upon to see if you're really worthy of the office, the successor, the 267th successor to St. Peter. Personnel is policy. Your references are character indicators. I wouldn't want those men anywhere near my CV. And it's not a stretch to say that when you put those references down, and these men are of questionable, even Catholic faith, I suspect many of them don't even believe in God and have an active antagonism toward God, in point of fact, that they are the further manifestation of the Freemasonic and calculated, even satanic and Marxist, to be sure, infiltration of the church that dates back before World War II, carried out by women like Bella Dodd and other influencers inside the church and out. This is I hope it's the end of it. I hope it's the culmination. I hope it's the exhaustion of that. I was hoping that Francis would be where we could put some of that to rest, where the house could be cleansed, the Vatican Bank could be cleansed, the corruption that is rampant, and the apostasy, the covering up of sexual abuse scandals, of scandals in general, could be addressed. That there could be a cleansing, a true cleansing of the church. But with those guys as your references, that's not happening. And he's 69 years old. So we're in for it for 20 plus years, most likely.
What's your theory for how he won? Because why was this so unexpected, I should say?
Yeah, it boils down to, and this is part of why I have such angst, is because there were some signs that were leading me, at least according to the reporting, the reportage coming from Rome, that there might be a Pope Pius the 13th in the form of Cardinal Sarah or Cardinal Burke or someone along those lines, a true reformer, meaning reformer getting back to actual Catholicism, and a man who would absolutely halt and forever banish the type of suppression of the Latin Mass, uh, and the persecution of Orthodox Catholics and Christians within the church. And that was like Cardinal Maradiaga of Honduras, who was just Pope Francis's right hand man. You know who we haven't heard a lot of, by the way, is Cardinal Fernandez, Tuco Fernandez. We'll see where a good indicator of or confirmation of this is he going to remain the prefect for the Doctrine of the Faith, the CDF, or whatever they're calling it now? I mean, if he is, well, then we know exactly where this is going. But okay, so we heard that this Mandrigaga, I forget how to pronounce his name. It's a wild Spanish Central American name, who was, by the way, he was an abuser. And he had covered up not only for himself an abuse of seminarians, but a scandal that erupted in Nicaragua during his time. Anyways, he left Rome because he's like, the Cardinals are trending right. They're going to repudiate everything that Francis did, and we can't go back and stuff like that. And it just seemed that everybody was concerned on the left and progressive side that there was going to be a retraction. They were going to get someone who was going to bring the church back to tradition, orthodoxy, its essential nature, doing what the church does best, and that's save souls, lex orandi, lex credendi, and vice versa. And that was all just nothing. That it was almost as if that was meant to, like yeast, fluff up the bread or the hope, puff it up, only to deflate it right away. Because it was kind of an unreasonable ask, because the whole Francis pontificate was designed for this end. It wasn't, Francis didn't want a one-off to his ruination of the church, his taking the church in an alternative direction. An alternative direction, a satanic direction, demonic direction. I mean, look at what the head Freemason in Rome said. They lamented Pope Francis's death. They said finally we had a pope that was aligned with our goals of global I don't know, advancement or what have you, and all the rest of the bullshit that they say. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what the direction he was taking it. And he had consistory after consistory after consistory. He named over 100 he named over 100 cardinals. How could we expect that the same men who are elevated to this place? I mean, we have Cardinal Wilton Gregory. Now he didn't vote, but come on. We have Cardinal McIlroy. We have Cardinal Cupich. We have Cardinal Tobin. Cardinal Farrell. These guys are all Uncle Ted
Cupich
nephews.
voted, right?
Yes, because he's under 80. Now, another thing is he sent
He
his
should be gone.
he should be gone. He's past 75, but Francis kept him in there,
Right.
of course.
Letter
And
got lost in the mail.
this just okay. And we were talking about references before. You want to hear something that's even more deflating of that hope that was like leavened bread starting to emerge that we might have a Cardinal Sarah be Pope Pius the 13th. Well, who's grinning ear to ear right next to Leo the 14th? Pietro Parolin, the guy who has suffocated the faithful in China, who has emboldened. I mean, talk about remember the ancient popes and the medieval popes who literally went to war over lay investiture, the ability of secular authorities to name bishops. This was the major controversy of the Middle Ages. And the popes warred in a literal and figurative sense against these temporal rulers. And then what do? We have a papabile and Vatican Secretary of State who's grinning ear to ear while he's standing next to Robert Prevost as the next pope. The guy who is choking and allowing the Chinese not just to elevate candidates, but actually pick bishops. And the underground church in China is being snuffed out by the Chinese communists. This is not accommodation. This is cooperation. The official church with the Chinese Communist Party to root out Christianity. And then who else? Who else is grinning ear to ear? Blaze Cardinal Cupich. This was his man. Not only that, who are the Austin Ivory, the radical leftist commentator who never saw an abortion or a feminist that he didn't applaud. And then Father James Martin, SJ, defender of all things gay, right? But theology with the double
Slim Jim?
entendre.
Is that Slim Jim?
Yeah, that's Slim Jim. Who did they name? Who did they both name? Austin Ivory and James Martin as their favorite candidate. Robert Prevost. That's it's not therefore just simply black pill conjecture about where this is headed. It all matches. Now, I will afford two things as white pills here. And I want to get to the comments because it's not just me throwing out what I suspect is the direction. Leo the 14th on the Loggia today talked about the direction of where this is going. And the language and ideas are unmistakable. They're incontrovertible of where this is going. But the two white pills I think we have to hold on to is one.
I have a couple more than I think.
Okay, then
Say yours.
please add my two most prominent and chief white pills is one, if it's a continuation of the purgatory that we've experienced like under Francis, and maybe if it's even intensified. One, it accelerates the cleansing of the church because the authentic church will become all the more clearer. If, for example, he does something radical and mandates something that's utterly and clearly contrary to faith that Pope Francis did, rendering him an anti-pope. That's what Francis was. He was an anti-pope. Then we'll have another anti-pope. And that will only see the faith and the fervor as the alternative to modernism and truly as the alternative to all heresies, New Age, environmental worship, Arianism, Nestorianism, all the Manichaeism, all of the great falsehoods that are leading and have led Gnosticism, souls to hell. I would include Judaism and Zionism within that. Okay. And Judaizing. All of those errors, the alternative becomes more, it becomes clearer. So it's as though we are walking out into the country in the wilderness, and it's from there that we see the light of the stars of the faith all the more brilliantly.
Mm.
And we're attracted to that beauty. And it's not as though we're deceived as to where to go or how to reach it. And there's enthusiasm in going together toward that light. That's unmistakable. And it's a fire that can't be extinguished through mere authority or supposed authority. So that's one white pill. Um, the second white pill um, has escaped my mind, maybe because it's so black pilled, but that was the first one. So why don't you give me yours and my second one will
Okay,
come to
so
mind, I
so
hope.
mine was a little bit of that. That was
Wait, I'm
go
sorry
ahead.
to
Go
interrupt
ahead.
you because it just popped in my
No, go
head
ahead.
and I know I'm
Go
gonna
ahead.
lose it. And that is and I can't believe I lost it again because I was so excited that I figured it out. Damn it, just go. Okay.
Cut me off if you remember it again.
Oh, yeah, I know, I do. We have to hold out for a radical change. I mean, because there are times in the longest pontificate in history, Pius the Ninth was seen, albeit again, these terms have totally different meanings, totally, almost utterly disassociative with what they mean today. But Pius the Ninth, when he was elected in the middle of the 19th century, was considered a liberal within the church. He was looking to alter certain even liturgical practices, the church's approach to the world, how it understood right governance, for example, and the church's place vis-a-vis public life and the state. Yeah. And then he had a radical conversion, and he's the pope that produces Unum Sanctum and the papal bulls that were related to the syllabus of errors, which were these brilliant passages against or condemnations of modern heresies. So you have to hold out hope that there's maybe Pope Leo XIV looks at what and encounters what he had only heard whispers of, sees it face to face, the corruption within the hierarchy and within the church, and says, well, I'm the Pope and I'm young enough and vibrant enough to do it. Benedict wasn't, and we'll get to Benedict a little bit later on. But
Okay.
he didn't have the stones or the capacity, the energy to do it. I got to. Christ is calling me to do this. I'm not confrontational. I've gotten this far by being diplomatic, but the time for diplomacy is over because I don't have to be diplomatic toward evil. That would be my second white pill. So forgive me. I promise I won't
I think the
interrupt you.
first one, I would steal bits of the first one that you mentioned.
Hmm.
And I I was thinking about this earlier. I just can't believe he's from the south side of Chicago.
Right.
And I think that's a white pill because, ANCAP history, ANCAP, we talk about ANCAP history here. Americans aren't dumb. And there's just some spiritual intuition with even the people that I talk to a lot, especially those that maybe know a little bit about the faith or grew up in the Catholic faith and maybe aren't as involved in the faith yet. They're still not dumb. And I do think that there's pretty good spiritual intuition amongst Americans, and there's just more light on the American Catholic Church, which is booming like crazy over the last couple of years, in spite of Francis,
Yes.
right? So,
Yes. As one priest told me, the new converts know Tertullian, Justin Martyr, and Jerome, and they understand the role and the centrality of the papacy, but none of them converted because of Pope Francis. And while they knew that he was Pope during their conversion and then advancement through formation and the catechumenate, they don't reference him. They just say, okay, that's the Pope. And now I'm going to read from Irenaeus.
right. I think that process accelerates
Mm,
times three or four just by him being from America, just by him
okay.
being from the south side of Chicago. And there's some there's some Southsiders probably tonight that haven't thought about the Catholic faith. Maybe they fell away from the Catholic faith over time, and now they're starting to think about it a little more, and they're looking into the Catholic faith at a time where it's it's increasing, especially amongst the Orthodox and the traditional, uh, as opposed to the more liberal and progressive. They're thinking about it's at least on their mind now, and it wasn't
Yes.
before.
Yes.
And there's also the piece where um, I lost my train of thought on that.
It's contagious. But could I interject just for a moment? I think you're gonna have a hard sell to me that Americans are not stupid and American Catholics aren't
We
stupid
definitely
by and
respect
large.
capitalism more than Argentina.
Well, not
Obviously,
anymore. I
maybe
don't know
not
about
now, maybe
anymore.
not anymore, maybe
Yeah,
not anymore, but at the time,
but
right? Or most European countries, wouldn't you say that Americans in general have a little less respect for, I don't know, authority than most other countries?
Charlie, go back to COVID.
This happened like we
I
still
know.
weren't Peru though. Like we still weren't Peru. We still
I
there's still 20 some year old guys
I get
that
that,
are
but
all
again,
like
we're
that are all coming back to the faith right now. They're like, I don't want this whole game. I want the traditional, I want
I
the
get that.
Orthodox. That's why people are coming back. I'm saying that exact process is happening times two. The types of guys like me who are like,
Sure.
this is all so stupid.
Yes.
Those types of guys that might have not, gone to, or grew up in the Catholic faith or fell away from the Catholic faith. That stuff's happening quicker now, just for him being from America.
Yes. But just in terms of sheer numbers and impact, that's still a relatively small group. The much larger group is the 70% of American Catholics that don't believe in the real presence. The
Yeah,
boomer
but
generation, the
I
boomer
get that, but
generation
we
that
have to correct.
they're the
You talked about
worst.
this.
They listen, this is the generation that is now both the most moneyed and influential is still the boomers and late Gen Xers who are the most poorly catechized. They as the guys on Avoided Babylon, Rob and Anthony,
Yeah.
and then Father Muir were talking about this week in their podcasts. They have they call these things spells, conciliar spells that have been cast on the Catholic laity in particular, but also it goes through religious and the clerical world as well, about pre-conciliar times and then what the council was, what it meant to accomplish, what it did accomplish, what it affected.
Yep.
Yes. So let's say like, oh, and I know the spells, by the way, the spell that is most prominent when you bring up what parochial school life was like in Chicago under the nuns, they beat the hell out of us. The brothers beat us. Remember when Teddy got smacked with the textbook and then got paddled? That's all they talk about. It's like this masochistic and sadist ritual. They don't talk about the one nun that was in front of 54 kids and ran the classroom like a general, but those kids learned. They knew how to diagram sentences. They wrote with beautiful penmanship. They were 2 or 3 years advanced beyond any public school student. They don't remember the beauty of the Catholic school system or the Mass, by the way, or any of the liturgy. They never mention that. They'll say, oh, so I couldn't really follow as an altar boy what was going on. Well, that's not true because you were being taught Latin in the school. You should have been able to follow along. So they have these spells cast on them about this retrograde, anachronistic, outdated church that was mystical and not meeting their temporal needs. And then what happens? Then they're catechized in the post-conciliar world where such utter confusion and such utter division that no one knows what the hell to believe in anymore because the law, lex orandi, lex credendi, has just been ripped from them. They're out. You have massive, what would be the word, uh, exiting of seminarians, priests leaving the priesthood, sisters. 500,000 religious women left. 500,000 left.
Okay, yeah, I understand. I'm just cutting you
So,
off because I
okay,
don't
sorry.
want you to think that I'm like this super white pilled about this. I'm actually a lot closer to you on all of this. The point I'm just trying to make is that, especially, you're bringing up a lot of the like the boomer nun stuff.
Yes.
I'm talking about people my age, like the 20 something year old dudes that are my age that for the
I hear you.
last 2 or 3 years have been with new converts is probably what could be the leading demographic is 20 something
And I'm saying in and
young
of
men.
themselves, in and of yourselves, you are the life and vitality and energy that's reverberating throughout the church. The problem is, and I was talking to again another faithful priest about this tonight. How do you think the boomers who are still in power, they're still in control, they still have that spell cast on them that they're never going back to the traditions of the past. They're never going back to the orthodoxy and the solid hardcore Catholicism that once existed and was operative within the church. Do they think that you're a threat, or are they ready to sing all are welcome to you?
Like I said,
I think I
I'm
think it's
closer to
galling.
you.
This the converts, the orthodoxy, the tradition, the full to the brim Institute of Christ the King Sovereign Priest masses, the new chapel that's built by the SSPX, the the fact that tradition is being embraced by young families, and these are where the vibrancy of the church is. It's galling to them, and they
Right.
want it's a thorn. They see this as disgusting, and they want to root it out as much as possible.
I understand all of that.
Okay.
But it doesn't stop people from converting. It doesn't stop people, it doesn't stop souls from converting. And I'm saying the Pope being
Oh,
from America, being from Chicago accelerates that entire process that you were bringing up in your first point about the kind of like the economic correction of the church where
but is there a limit to that? And what I mean by that is, again, I suspect that this has something to do with the relief that I felt when Pope Francis died. Because for cradle Catholics like you and I, and for those who are properly formed in the faith, as many in our generations have been now, because they've rejected the modernism, the feminism, all of the shit of the 60s and 70s life and culture, because we were the ones who were affected by that. We were affected by the fact that 60 million of our brothers and sisters are were crushed and mutilated and killed within the womb. I mean, just ponder that for a moment. How many friends, neighbors, spouses were genocided? And so we reject that. Yes. And we move toward that which is one, holy apostolic true. You see? But and with Francis, he I got the sense that as the energy built toward, and there was a differentiation that we spoke of before between this is the Orthodox way and Francis is crusty old liberal progressive. He's talking about climate change and one world order, and everybody's rejecting that. You got, I mean, might, as much as no one might like Trump in terms of his Catholicism or what there is there, or so sort of
I get what you're trying to
affiliation
say
we
now. I
might
get what you're
have.
saying now.
You get this repudiation of that, right?
I get what you're saying.
We can cheer that on, but when it goes on indeterminate, this is going to be a nut. This is going to be 20 plus years of, is he going to repeal fiducia supplicans? Is he going to repeal traditionis custodes? The bishops that Francis appointed now are under Leo the 14th. Do you think that the new archbishop in Detroit, where there were 28 thriving Latin mass parishes, and just prior to Easter, this guy has the gall to close them all on those communities? Do you think that's going to stop? And at some point, and I am sympathetic to this, there are alternatives. There are alternatives, and I've seen it already on social media. The ortho bros are all over this. The ortho bros are all over this. Oh, we don't have this problem in orthodoxy, right? Or even solid traditional Catholics that are. I was listening to Taylor Marshall and his live comments after the Well, actually, during and then after the elevation of Prevost to the See of Peter, and people were live chatting and with him, and some of them were saying, I can't stay, I can't stay anymore. This is going to continue. I can't have a leader. You see, now I don't agree with this position, but I'm saying it is logical that this is galling and it's exhausting to a point where you're like, I can't take this anymore.
Yeah, I'm closer to you, but I'm talking white pills here. And yeah,
Right.
the Vatican's the deep state of all deep states, and we could talk
Yeah.
about all those things.
Hmm.
I'm talking about the process of, and this is worth mentioning too. With the internet, the laity is more powerful than ever.
Okay.
Think about this. I mean, no, I'm serious. Like if
But
somebody has a
but
theological question, if somebody has a theological question, they could just tweet at you if you wanted. They could ask you,
but with
Gary
all
Richard.
I know, but with all of that, who are better catechized, the medieval peasants of the 10th century or today? I mean, the medieval peasants of the 10th century, they could walk into Saint-Chapelle or the cathedral in Reims, and being illiterate, they were better catechized. And we have the internet, but that hasn't led to, again, I get the fervor of the emerging, those who are
I would argue it
re-inspired in
has.
their faith.
I would argue the internet has had a big impact on young men my age joining the faith
And
or
yet,
taking the faith more serious or
I
taking the faith
agree.
more seriously.
But 70% of Catholics don't even believe in the real presence.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's still an issue. I'm not talking about that.
Okay, but then let's look at this other dynamic of that. Why, if you have all of this fire for the faith, whether you're a convert or you're a revert, you're rediscovering the truth and beauty of Catholicism, which is there and inherent in the church and for all to see and to take in. And you go to a parish and you see a dying institution. I'm sorry, I'm not like I understand where and then you talk to someone who you trust. You're like, yeah, part of the dying is this Francis effect because you got these really progressive and anti-orthodox and heterodox and heretical and apostate. Some of them serial abusers or those who are covering up for them. Uh, they're at the head now. They're in charge, and then and does you see how that would logically damper I'd be like, I'm not hopping on here. And then now you have this, and it's like, so I guess I'm seeing the coin from the dark side, and you're seeing it from the bright side. You're saying that
No, I
despite
just
all
didn't
of
go.
this,
I look at it. I didn't go into this with it. Maybe you had more hope going into this than I did. And I think that's
mm-hmm,
probably where our differences stem and
sure,
the expectation versus reality differences
right.
are a lot bigger. I didn't go into this thinking I prayed that Cardinal Sarah would be the next pope, but looking at it logically, and I think a lot of people tend to have, especially with papal elections, I noticed that people just think illogically about it
Emotively,
in
emotively.
comparison to presidential. Part of it's that there's no like official presidential parties where we can say, there's 100 seats in the Senate. We think it's going to end up this way because there's this many Democrats, Republicans. Anyways, we don't really have that within the church. But
Hmm.
let's be real. Cardinal Sarah being elevated to the Pope would be the political equivalent of Dave Smith actually being president of the United States.
In terms of effect or probability or both.
Probability.
I was much more on the side of effect because
You think Sarah has a better shot, you would
yes,
say.
because of where he had risen to, and
Yeah.
and furthermore,
Maybe that's a bad comparison.
because too, you're saying laity has a greater power than before. If you were to ask the faithful invested, both monetarily in terms of fervor, allegiance to the true church, laity, if we were to do a poll of the most fervent and faithful Catholics, who they wanted to be pope, it would be Sarah.
But they don't vote.
No, obviously, but my point is that
Oh, I get where,
you
yeah,
were
yeah. The
saying that the lady
popular
has,
vote.
yes, the
I
lady
meant
has more power than ever.
the lady is more powerful in, messaging.
Right.
carrying out the faith. Think about how many people. I mean, I got a ton of messages today. Hey, hey, that guy's from Chicago. Hey, that guy's the new pope. New pope's from Chicago. I'm sure you got 100 of these too.
Yeah. And then, but again, being from Chicago, that's bad. I mean, I at one point I felt I was like I had to pause and bite my tongue because I was corresponding with someone, and the immediate reaction that I had was they asked me what's the reaction, and I said I hate to sound like the Pharisees here. I'm going to paraphrase the Pharisees here, but what good comes
Nothing
from
but good
leftist
comes from
South Side
Chicago.
Chicago, right? And so I hope that in paraphrasing the Pharisees, I wasn't committing a sin. But what I'm saying is, it's I sound like them, but that doesn't mean they were wrong.
No, I think the attention that the church is going to have in Chicago, I think that's gonna have a good effect on people my age. I just think it will.
Well,
I think
okay,
that
but yeah, yeah. Here's the problem.
the
You got
70% stat that still might exist, I think.
I see. I find that problematic because you're just gonna have people going. I already see the stupid memes like, "Bless everybody in the world except Green Bay."
Yeah, I
It's
know
just
those
like
are
this
so dumb.
stupid shit,
Okay,
and
but you knew
it's
that
just
was gonna happen. But
galling
you knew that
meatball
was gonna
crap.
happen.
I know, but if the reaction is yay he's American and yay he's Chicago, it breaks one of two ways. Either yay he's American and yay he's Chicago and he's a liberal, and so people go, oh, okay, well he's still the Pope, and we have the view type Catholics who are like, yeah, I like him just as much as Francis, and I
Okay.
even have greater affiliation for him because he's taken on Trump now, because he could do so in English. And this was political too. They elevate McIlroy to Washington after Trump's election. And now they elevate an American Pope so he could, and he's already been vocal in terms of his antagonism toward nationalistic, sovereign treatment of migrants. So, and deportations and all this. So you're going to do that. And so the people are going to be like, yay, yay. They have this suit. It's going to result in a superficial allegiance. Or the first time that he says, well, actually, as American, abortion is a genocide and the church will always remain against it, then they're going to be like, oh, fuck him, right? I don't need to listen to him. It's just that it's always the superficiality of it all. It doesn't bring any depth, and it doesn't. By the way, when he says something, if eventually he says something orthodox, it's not as if they're going to say, you know what, he's an American, he's from Chicago. I had this kind of, I'm going to give him a listen. I'm not going to leave him a listen. You think that because all of a sudden church pews are going to be filled at St. Walter's, all these parishes that are on the brink of closing because of Cupich, because the Pope is from the South Side of Chicago? It's not lasting. It's artificial.
I hear you on all of that. It reminds me of when I was coaching basketball and let's say you're down big, you're just playing a team that's way better than you,
Hmm.
and you're down 30 points. Well, the first thing you got to tell your team if you're down 30 points is there's no 30-point shot.
Sure.
It's twos and threes, the big score, stop, score that a basketball coach says. I think that sometimes, and especially in more traditional circles, I think a lot of the times we're looking for this 30-point shot that just doesn't exist.
Right.
Or
Right.
we're looking to go back in time to the 19th century or something, and we don't forget that it took 100 plus years to get of decline to get to this mess.
Yeah.
And
I'm glad you.
I think that's a real issue that people have is that, and I think on days like today where it's a big announcement and we get our hopes up
Hmm.
and then it
Hmm.
actually happens and we're kind of like I just don't understand the total black pill. And
Yeah.
this is what I would say.
I get it.
I disagreed on some of the tweets, although I would say I'm definitely more black pilled or more on your side on this as well. But
Yeah.
the the immediate freak out just because something happened,
Sure.
this stuff takes time.
Sure.
Like this
And
stuff's gonna play out over the next decade.
let me express my gratitude and appreciation to you for pointing that out because you're really implicating me in a just way because I have this 30-point shot quixotic element within me. It's just my personality type. It's whether I'm just a kind of sanguine personality or I'm I live my life taking a lot of 30-point shots. And so as a result, and in my faith life, I go 150 miles an hour.
Right.
And at times, and I'm sorry to individuals that even have been put off maybe by that, because I have to recognize that not everybody operates at that level and enjoys the extremes or wants uh, not just solid progression and development over time, gradual moves step by step, and appreciating that. I just want to go. and, and I feel, and maybe whether it's in with my family members or with individual individuals with whom I have relationships in parish life or even outside of the church, I can understand why they take that as, whoa, whoa, calling yourself a fanatic, a religious and Catholic fanatic, being an anarcho-capitalist and saying that without any hesitation about what the reaction when you talk about the theories might be,
Yeah.
that could be a little bit off-putting, especially if I start, if even in a subconscious way, I'm conveying that I'm conveying like frustration that you're not there yet
Right.
or you don't want to go as fast.
Yeah.
So I really, that's a beautiful, I wouldn't even call it, like, I don't think you were trying to correct me, but you were just indicating and trying to raise my attention level to the point where
No,
I have that
I mean,
disposition.
I think I wasn't just talking about you. This is stuff that I see all the time.
Well,
This
I
is
get it, but
something
I
that
took it to heart and applied it to me.
this isn't something that, but I wake up and it's, we're talking ANCAP history. Like government still exists today.
Sure.
It still is going to exist tomorrow. Like we're still going to get
Yes.
taxed. We're still going to get taxed next year. Like
Yeah,
we
it's
paid
like
this year.
Shawshank Redemption. It took Andy Dufresne a long time to take that little rock hammer and dig through the walls of Shawshank Prison. I want to get to the end where he's boring through the tunnel. Enough with the gradual chip away, chip away, chip away. Let's get to it, you know?
Yeah.
Even if he doesn't make it out, even if he doesn't make it out of the prison, right?
Right. And I don't even think that's necessarily the issue. It's more so just the emotional letdown of when you have days like today where you think that you can just get through the tunnel at once just because it feels
Hmm.
like a newer day than it actually is.
Yes.
I think that's the bigger issue. And
Hmm.
then it's all like gloomy because it's not there because we
Yeah.
had some weird internal dream that
Hmm.
we were gonna hit a 30 pointer. That's what
Yeah.
I would call it.
That's well said. Should we get to the transcript?
Yeah.
Okay, let's just read so people understand that we're not speaking out of our ass about where this worrisome trajectory might lead us under Leo the 14th. So let me read the transcript from what he said from the Loggia. Peace be with all of you. Of course, this is a translation from the Italian and the Latin that he used. Dearest brothers and sisters, this is the first greeting of the risen Christ, the good shepherd who gave his life for God's flock, which is kind of weird because why would that be the first greeting? It's his first greeting. I too would like this greeting of peace to enter your hearts, to reach your families and all people wherever they are, all of the people all over the world or earth. Peace be with you. Okay. This is the This is the peace of the risen Christ, an unarmed peace and an disarming peace, humble and preserving. It comes from God, God who loves us all unconditionally. Okay. Now we're getting into some problems, are we not? We still have in our ears that weak but always courageous voice of Pope Francis as he blessed Rome. Okay. The Pope who blessed Rome gave his blessing to the world, to the entire world, that Easter morning. So he's alluding to Pope Francis addressing the world or doing, on Easter before his passing. Allow me to follow up on that same blessing. God loves us, God loves you all, and evil will not prevail. We are all in the hands of God. Therefore, without fear, united hand in hand with God and among ourselves, let us sing a new church into being. And no, he didn't say that. I'm just
I was
joking.
gonna
Okay.
say,
Therefore, without fear, this is really Leo the 14th. Therefore, without fear, united hand in hand with God and among ourselves, we move forward. We are disciples of Christ. But again, okay, but not the whole world is. So there seems to be a,
I think that's a little picky. I think that's a little
okay.
nitpicky.
Christ precedes us. The world needs his light. Humanity needs him as the bridge to allow it to be reached by God and by his love. Okay, here's the problem. It's a little bit low Christology for my liking. Athanasius and Cyril of Alexandria would go, wait a second. The Pontifex of Rome is a bridge. He's the bridge builder. That's what literally Pontifex pontiff means in Latin, the bridge maker. Humanity needs Christ as the bridge to allow it to be reached by God in his love. No, Christ is God,
Right.
and Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. He's a bridge in the sense that it's only through him that we have life eternal
Hmm.
in unity with the triune God. But he's not just simply the conduit. He is the only begotten Son of the Father, God from God, light from light, true God from true God.
Say that sentence again. Can you say that sentence again?
Humanity needs him as the bridge to allow it to be reached by God and by his love. Now, the second person of the Trinity is fully God, fully man. And it's by his incarnation and sacrifice and then resurrection that we have life. He's not a bridge per se or only. Okay. Hold on one second. The dog's annoying me. I got to let him out. Get out. Can you take it? Baby German Shepherd. All right. So then he continues on. He says, help us to and help each other, help us to and help each other to build bridges with dialogue. We must have the conversation with meetings, uniting us all to be one people, always in peace. Thank you, Pope Francis, the great uniter, right? I also want to thank all my brother cardinals who have chosen me to be Peter's successor and to walk together with you as a united church, always seeking peace, justice, always seeking peace, justice, always seeking to work as men and women who are faithful to Jesus Christ without fear to proclaim the gospel, to be missionaries. He goes on to say, I am a son of St. Augustine, an Augustinian who said, with you I am a Christian and for you I am a bishop. In this sense, we can all walk together towards that homeland that God has prepared for us. To the Church of Rome, a special greeting. We must seek together how to be a missionary church, a church that builds bridges, dialogue, always open to
Did he
receive
say
like
dialogue?
this. Yep. Always open to receive like this square with its open arms, all who need our charity, our presence, dialogue, and love. He loves that word dialogue. If you allow me a word, a greeting to all, and especially to my beloved diocese of Chilao in Peru, where a faithful people accompanied their bishop, shared by faith, and gave so much to continue being a church that is faithful to Jesus Christ. To all of you brothers and sisters of Rome, of Italy, of the whole world, we want to be a church of the synod. Here's a huge problem. Okay. Cardinal Mueller pointed out the nexus of the problem is synodality within the Francis
Right.
pontificate and within that he wants to keep this going is a huge hurdle. A church that walks, a church that always seeks peace, that always seeks charity, that always seeks to be close, especially to those who suffer. Today is the day of the supplication to Our Lady of Pompeii. Our Mother Mary always wants to walk with us, to be close, to help us with her intercession and her love. So I would like to pray together with you. Let us pray together for this new mission, for the whole church, for peace in the world. And let us also ask Mary, our mother, for this special grace. And then he prayed the Hail Mary. Okay? Reactions? Your reactions?
It brings up Francis a whole lot.
He sure does. He sure does. Even the point where, I'm sorry, but he's he's basically canonizing Francis. You can say he's not there yet, but I'm sorry. If this Pope canonizes Francis,
No,
there's schism.
no, he's not.
Okay. That's that I will the idea that any pope would canonize John the 23rd and Pius the 6th, and we had that. So,
I'm not as I'm not as apt on that comparison
okay,
as you are, but
I bet give it a few years.
okay.
I will I'll tell you what, I'll be moderately surprised if he doesn't move to canonize Francis.
Oh, you're there.
Yep.
That wasn't just a
Oh no, I'm
that wasn't just a feeler.
that well that wasn't just a we hope and pray for the Holy Father's our my predecessor's holy repose. I bet if you went back and looked at Benedict's remarks about John Paul II, they weren't as hagiographical
Mm,
as John Paul II, who was eventually, one might argue, rightly or wrongly canonized, but I think had a better resume or background to argue for canonization than Pope Francis certainly does.
yeah. Oh, it's getting late. Do you want to talk about a town, or do you have other thoughts on the Pope?
No, let's pray and wait and see.
Okay.
I know. I'm just fearing that that first encyclical is going to be a doozy.
Do you want to talk about a town that also uses the word dialogue too
A
much?
whole lot. Yeah.
Here it is.
Boom.
Meanwhile in Oak Park.
We go to your gay suburb now.
The People segment brought to you by Trinity Brewing. Viva Cristo Rey.
Viva Cristo Rey.
First one, D200 installs new school board. Not exactly the, not exactly any white smoke for this one. Williams Lee replaces longtime president
There might
Kofsky.
be smoke, but
Kurtz Hotel. Yeah,
the
yeah.
smoke of sulfur of demons. Yeah.
In 12 years, Tom Kofsky has seen almost everything as a member and then president of the OPRF High School District 200 Board of Education. With his finance background, he often focused on the district's financial concerns, including a ballooning fund balance. Under his leadership, the board modified the budgetary process while shifting the district's financial mindset, committed to balancing expenses and revenue over the long term while eliminating end of year true up budgets.
How heroic of them.
Quote,
They actually have to run a balanced budget to have an institution function. Go ahead.
quote, we changed our levy philosophy from
Tax to the max. That's such a great admission. That's such a great admission. We're just gonna say it out loud. Our philosophy, well, our levy philosophy was tax to the max. That is great to levy what was needed. Oh,
we have to put that on a t-shirt.
yes.
Tax to the max.
Welcome to Oak Park.
To levy what was needed, Kofsky said, may that's unbelievable. I cannot believe he said that out loud.
Well, he's gone. He could let loose a little bit.
Yeah, deathbed
Yeah.
confession.
Yeah,
A
exactly.
little bit.
Yeah.
Kofsky said May 1st at his final board meeting, which installed the new board, including new president Audrey Williams Lee and newcomers Josh Gertz and Kathleen Odell. Quote, I'm very proud that after maximum levies in years directly preceding my service, we have completed 12 consecutive years of not taxing to the max. This is unbelievable. Something unheard of, leaving roughly $80 million plus interest in our taxpayers' pockets. And this equates to roughly one full year of D200
You
taxes.
gotta love how they're applauding for not stealing
It's
more from
unbelievable.
people. Yes, they're the heroes.
But on departing the board, Kosky made himself clear that there was a lot more to his role than financial. What's he going to remember most? Quote, it's not one thing, he said. It's about making sure this is a pillar in our community for our students, and that includes having strong academic programs, strong facilities, and being able to stay around for a long time. The biggest challenge in his tenure was no surprise, the COVID-19 pandemic.
Uh,
It was crazy, he said. I mean, it's a blur now, but it was just so uncharted, and you were just trying to kind of live for a new day. We were facing laws and changes and didn't know what to do the next day. Okay, so
this guy was an active.
this is worth mentioning. So
Yes.
so he would say this was Tom Kofsky, what he brought up in the meeting, the big we're gonna shut down winter sports meeting. Tom Kofsky was saying he brings up the point. I actually watched this whole meeting. Um,
Back in the day.
he's back in the day. He said he basically suggests to the rest of the board that, well, I know we can't mandate vaccination to the students, but can we mandate vaccination for all of our athletes because that's
Mhm.
an extracurricular. That's this guy.
He was an apostle of this. He added to it. He wasn't just some standby, correct? Or bystander to all this. That's what that I love how the main criminals, the main persecutors of people of the during COVID are all the what they're the ones saying, I was just I can't believe how crazy it was. It was such a blur. No, you
Right.
contributed to the hostilities. You contributed to the crimes. You contributed to the evisceration of basic civil liberties and the well-being, mental and physical well-being of, in this case, children and adolescents. So I love the uh, non mea culpa here.
Quote, we had a year of students not in this building.
Did you still get paid?
Kofsky received multiple testimonials about his long-term work from the board members with whom he served, including Williams Lee and Fred Arkin, both of whom were reelected April 1st. Quote, your 12 years of commitment have been remarkable, Arkin said. The change that you have helped lead has reshaped the future of the district. The district is now aligned to provide 21st century learning to all of our students.
No, it's
Well, yeah,
not. They can barely read.
it's 25 years in.
Yeah.
Williams Lee, who was appointed to her role in July 2023, built on that, saying Kofsky leaves the district on, quote, very firm footing in terms of not just the financial piece, which you do quite well, but also the process and the infrastructure. I want to express my personal appreciation for all you've done and how you've helped me personally.
They
In
had sex.
addition, in addition to Williams Lee being named board president, Tim Brandhurst was named vice president and Dr. Jonathan Livingston was named secretary. After a contentious April 1st election cycle, which saw Gertz run on a slate with Nate Melman, Gertz emerged victorious and said Thursday he was ready to get started. Suffice to say for Gertz, it was a long journey to Thursday. He noted that the mere fact of holding his right hand up as he was sworn in was, quote, a little surreal.
What do you think was going to go on?
Quote, I didn't really envision this coming, being all in the middle of it, but now it's exciting. It begins the formality to it and really marks the beginning of my term.
Well, no shit. That's the whole purpose.
The key for Gertz
Okay.
is attacking his learning curve. He's met with several board members individually while looking back at board records, in a word, studying. Quote, I have a couple of things that I've already mentioned to board members individually that I think are not very controversial, but I'd like to explore, he said. One of them being the safety issue with the bathrooms, trying to look into some sort of monitoring device for bathrooms to try and cut down on vaping in the bathrooms. So I'd like to explore that. Odell, who is a professor of economics at Dominican University and associate provost, is ready to jump in as well. Quote, it's a great institution, really a treasure for the community, as someone said. And so being part of carrying that institution through its next 4 years is very meaningful for me, she said.
Fantastic.
Right into this, I feel like they don't run the articles by each other because it's just so juicy when they contradict.
Oh, yes. Okay. I'm already intrigued.
Housing costs burden Oak Park and River Forest households. Many Oak Park and River Forest renters and homeowners spend over 30% of their income on monthly housing payments, according to a metro area affordability report. Many Oak Park and River Forest households are spending more than a third of their monthly income on housing costs. Over 31% of Oak Park households and 35% of River Forest households are considered, quote, cost burden by their monthly housing expenses, meaning at least 30% of their monthly income goes directly to housing payments. Still, a slightly lower percentage of renters in Oak Park struggled to comfortably afford their rent than the average across Cook County, while the purchase price for homes in both communities soar above the area's median, according to a new report on regional housing affordability. According to new research contained in a report on 285 communities in Northeast Illinois, I'm not reading all that, spend more than they can comfortably afford on monthly housing payments. This is part of a region-wide trend as nearly half of all Chicagoland metro area renters and a quarter of all area homeowners struggle to comfortably afford their housing costs.
Well, when you choke off the housing supply through all this regulation and green initiatives, do you not understand? And really, the real crime is zoning that they'll never touch. But go ahead.
The study, which created a profile for every community area in Chicago and many other municipalities across 7 Illinois counties, found that 48% of all regional renters and 25% of regional homeowners are cost burdened by their housing costs. Many in that cohort spend more than 50% of their monthly income on their housing costs, according to the report. The
Good
study
thing they're
paints a
spending all that property tax on Oak Park River Forest and they're
ta-
bored.
tax the max. The
Yeah.
study paints a picture of what affordability in the village looks like for current residents, as village leaders look to promote density while striving to improve affordability in Oak Park and River Forest.
We're going
The
to
study,
strive. Not going
the,
to build
stu-
more houses. We just got to strive.
the study of the municipalities relied on 2023 survey data and included figures from more than 23,000 Oak Park households and more than 4,200 River Forest households. According to the report, Oak Park households' affordability metrics are not far off the averages for renters and homeowners in Cook County. In Oak Park, roughly 60%, 61% of homes are owner occupied and 39% are renter occupied. According to the report, in Oak Park, 26% of homeowners and 44% of renters are cost burdened by their monthly housing expenses. Over 13% of all Oak Park households spend more than 50% on their monthly housing costs. The average purchase price of a home in Oak Park was 430 grand in 2023 compared to 325 grand in all of Cook County. The median household income of a 2023 new home buyer in the village was 150 grand, much higher than the countywide average for new home buyers of 101 grand. The average monthly mortgage payment in Oak Park was 3170 compared to the countywide average of 2232. The median income of all Oak Park homeowners is $157,895, while the Cook County average, Oak Park's. Why are we comparing this to the rest of Cook County?
Yeah. I don't know. It's richer.
According to the report, the rate of vacant homes is significantly lower in Oak Park than it is countywide. Oak Park, because they're more expensive. Oak Park does have one of the largest percentages of old homes in the area, as 59% of all homes in the village were built in 1939 or earlier, compared to just 27% in Cook County overall. Do they think people aren't moving here because the houses are old?
I don't know. I don't get it. They think the older houses are more expensive too. What?
The average rent in Oak Park is higher than the average rent in Cook County, 1,456 in the village and 1,381 in the county. The median income of Oak Park's renter households is also 23% higher than the average among all Cook County renters. Almost done. In River Forest, 32% of homeowners and 77% of renters spend more than 30% of their income on monthly housing expenses. More than 11% of River Forest households spend more than 50% of their monthly income on housing costs. The report included data from 404 renter occupied households in the village. According to the report, 89% of River Forest households are owner occupied. The average purchase price in home sales in River Forest was 620 grand.
Hmm.
The average mortgage payment in the community was 4,001. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. There's a very simple solution to all that.
Can you talk about zoning for a minute?
Well, zoning, and Tom Woods had a great guest on who actually went to the extreme of saying that of all of the crimes the government perpetuates under the guise of both necessity and public benefit, zoning's worse than war. And I forget that, and he makes this big case as to why it is. And that when you get down to the regulations and the costs that are accrued and burden the ordinary productive ultimate taxpayer, zoning is a much greater and unseen crime against people, because again, there are so many prevailing interests that are allied to ensure that housing, for homeowners in particular, and the politicians, the public servants who say they serve them, that don't allow for housing stock to go up as any other market would to remedy a shortfall or shortage, so as to bring true and just prices, and through market function. It's housing is the worst in this area because of it. There's no area or sector of the economy more regulated for the benefit of the few to the detriment of the many. So if you consider how in less there are certain states and different counties where zoning laws are either non-existent or very, very few. In fact, the guy who Tom Woods had on, and maybe I'll include the guy's name in the show notes. He's from Southern Illinois and Central Illinois, and he ran for the town trusteeship just based on getting rid of all zoning codes. And he said, for example, he bought an old bank that wasn't being used and had been shuttered for like 20 years, and he wanted to refurbish it, but because of the zoning that was still on the books from the 1940s, he could not refurbish it into a different purpose other than a financial institution. So how much does that stop economic growth?
Yeah.
Because the demand or expansion in the economy might be possible and the demand might be out there for an alternative, whether it be residential, commercial, industrial, whatever it might be. And there's just this inherent lack of recognition of emergent order, and that people fear that if you don't have zoning regulations, because someone's got to be out there making rules, well, then I'm going to have a bordello next to me overnight. That doesn't happen that way. It doesn't happen that way. Because of course there'd have to be a market for the bordello. There'd have to be feasibility for the bordello, and having it next to a bunch of school kids. It's just not feasible, nor is there a client base there for the most part, unless the parents are dropping off the kids and then getting a quickie. But the point being is that it just doesn't, everybody thinks it's like the wild, wild west if you don't have, and the wild, wild west, by the way, was much more ordered than it's often characterized as. So, in any case, they just think it's chaos without somebody in some wise, enlightened individual in Village Hall, right? That is operating with an associate's degree and got a crony position because they're the nephew of the mayor. They're the ones who should be able to determine whether a power plant or a cupcake store should be located next to a florist. It just doesn't make sense.
That's the segment, people.
Boom.
Meanwhile in Oak Park.
What would have happened if I'd gone for it and just said, no, I'm gay? Long episode. We kind
That
of
was
expected
long.
that.
That was long, but it flew by, and I hope people find it insightful because as you might suspect, my phone's been ringing off the hook and blowing. I get text message by the second and messages on Twitter and Facebook and other social media. So we'll put this out there. It'll serve as a good response.
Awesome.
All
All right,
right.
everyone, keep praying.
God bless everyone. Urbi et Orbi.
Peace.